When I first arrived in Cremona in 1976, there was no thought that Stradivari had designed his instruments. There was a large collection of wooden forms and other papers that were in a local museum, and the violin making school and all of the authorities who were coming through town at that time did not feel that he had designed the instruments themselves according to any specific, shall we say, geometric plan. Nothing existed. People were drawing things and saying, this might be it, that might be it, with the thought that if you knew the design, you'd have a better grasp on the sound of his great instruments. But there was no evidence that anyone could adduce to it. When I was there, I went to the museum and obtained permission to study all of the materials that were left behind, and there were many on the violin. I made drawings and photos of each thing that was there. Toward the end of a summer that I spent doing that, I learned that there was an old rusty trunk in the attic. And the custodian whom I had befriended said, "Hey, Carlo, come over here, take a look at this." And in that trunk were a number of geometric drawings of violins, the very thing that no one had found. And I thought, wow, what a treasure, what an opportunity. So I carefully traced and photographed all of those. That was 40 years ago. And during that whole time, I've thought about them and designed violins with that in mind, have analyzed the materials that were there and found that they actually conformed to the geometry that I subsequently discovered was common to Strad up to even Guadagnini. So it seemed like that was the way they designed them. The fact that nothing was there didn't mean that it was not used and then perhaps discarded or hidden away from public view. Very recently, a new inventory has been published. A very beautiful book has been done, and the city of Cremona has developed quite a beautiful complex to support and promote the violins of the classical period. In this inventory, they finally photographed some of the things that would answer the question of whether they were indeed designed or not. These were cardboard-backed drawings that were geometric and showed the details of the construction of the outline, which was the thing that had been missing. As it turned out, I had seen all of them before, and I want to show you a bit of what I discovered that would help us understand how they probably, including Strad, designed their instruments before they actually started cutting wood. And the designs show a very detailed geometric and mathematic approach to the construction. Interestingly, because so few of these materials ever survived, and these particular ones were not on public view for at least 70 years, there was no great thought that they had done anything to make this exactly what was like the architects of the period did. This is from Palladio's 4 books of architecture. He lived in a town only 30 miles from Cremona. He was well known, and he designed everything before he built it, just as modern architects do. Shouldn't be a surprise. Why wouldn't the violin makers do the same? So the point of today's discussion is that they did. We don't have anything that certainly points to Stradivari's own hand, but it points to the time period in which he was working and the way that he would have, no doubt, followed an exact and careful pattern. Let's take a look. My first year in Cremona, I taught English to make a living, and taught in a palace, un palazzo, without thinking about the fact that it might have a later connection in what we're doing tonight. But this was the Pallas Barbeau, a family who had a member that was a violinist and owned a Stradivari violin. He came a little later than Strad, probably born about 1737, about the year that Strad died, and he died in 1816. But what was left behind was a number of geometric drawings of Strad's instrument by some hand. We don't quite know who did it, but someone copied the instrument and created a geometric reconstruction of it. I want to show you a couple of these things and how this ties into our theme, that these instruments in that period were generally designed by people who were concerned about the instruments. Example. Here I will show you what that looks like, and we'll revert back to the photos for a moment to indicate exactly how that looked in the original forms. Then we'll go back to this. Uh-oh. Help?
That's it.
Here we are. One of the paper forms has this little annotation at the top that this is the form of an instrument enlarged in imitation of the original and made for Guiscardo Barbeau. So we know that this work was done, and someone probably done it on commission from him, some violin maker who knew how to make the design work. This is a drawing that is in the book that I just showed you, the full pattern. These are my photos in which I also photographed the details of this pattern all around the instrument. And what I found in doing so was compass work and very careful construction following a linear pattern that was laid out basically on graph paper by the person who drew this instrument. All the way down, everything is thought through. And this is the way I'm certain Stradivari and the other makers worked. Why wouldn't they? It was exactly right. It was the way other things were built during the Renaissance, and it would have followed through. So, in comparing those drawings to the wooden forms of Stradivari, I discovered to my pleasant surprise that the original shape, the forma eguale, as was written on one of those, is matched by the forma PG, the wooden form, that I have actually lectured on in my Minuan lectures. So that fits. The enlargement that this author created, ingrandita ad imitazione, enlarged to imitate, fits the other very famous Stradivari wooden form, the forma G. There's a violin owned by the city of Cremona today, dated 1715, owned by Joachim, the famous violinist, for whom Brahms wrote his violin concerto. And these match the larger of the two geometric forms. The other, very frequently used form of PG, matches the original. It would suggest that whoever the author of these drawings was, he was familiar with the violins and the theory behind them. And hence, we can't say that they operated in the dark with what they were building. And that has been proposed, but it is frankly opposed by this fact and this proof now. Happy carving, folks.